what a lot of experts are currently saying right now about this grand jury and any potential indictments that could come out of it, a lot of people don't necessarily think that if Willis is going to go after indictments, that it's going to be Trump directly.
Right.
It's a little bit of a stretch for anyone to say that at this point, based off of what we know.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by Supreme Court reporter Kaelan Deese. Kaelan, there was a controversy, not for the first time, involving Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. There was a state that was going to potentially honor him, the second African-American justice ever to sit on the Supreme Court. One would think that that might be a unifying thing, but it clearly wasn't. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so it was a very interesting statement that was made this week in the Georgia legislature. There was a vote along party lines to create a statue for Clarence Thomas, and it would be erected on the state capitol grounds if it were to pass. And Democrats were vehemently against this, and there was even one Democratic lawmaker that went as far as to say that Clarence Thomas was an Uncle Tom. And as we know, that is a racist and disparaging word.
Right.
It came from another black Democratic lawmaker that was talking about this. And, for a backstory on Clarence Thomas, he was raised, in a very poor environment in Georgia. And so for, that to be said, it alarmed conservatives. And immediately a lot of the reaction was, to push back on that. And so for this legislator to say this, it was kind of viewed as a controversial topic, but it's not the first time that this has happened before. So looking at the actual legislation at hand, this has passed as early as last year. They passed the Georgia State House, and it just never actually managed to get across the finish line. I spoke directly with a couple of the lawmakers in the state legislature myself, and they told me that they were pretty confident in this proposal actually getting across the finish line this year at some point. Now, the actual date that this statue would be put up, if it were to pass, hasn't been set yet. But I do know that this is not going to be a taxpayer-funded statue. It's going to be raised with private donations. So if it does end up passing, no taxpayer is going to be, just
subsidizing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Only voluntary donations.
Yeah.
So that's not all that's going on in Georgia. Georgia was obviously a competitive state in the 2020 presidential election that led to a certain amount of controversy over how the election was handled, and that in turn led to a certain amount of controversy over how former President Donald Trump interacted with people while votes were being counted and so forth. This has been under investigation. What can you tell us about what currently would keep us up to date on that?
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, there was a 26-member grand jury that was assembled in May 2022, and this is in Fulton County, so it's with District Attorney Fani Willis, a Democratic prosecutor who has been known as a sort of bulldog when it comes to cases where she really kind of sees perhaps something that she needs to look into. So what she was looking into exactly is what a lot of people are already familiar with. These calls, I should say, that President Trump had with Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, where he was asking for 11,000 some odd, votes that you would need, basically.
Need to find the votes.
Yeah,
find the votes.
Find these votes. Yeah. So it's pertaining to that, but also to this, basically a certificate that was signed by 16 Republicans who were basically calling themselves electors that could be substituted in order to, be the ones that actually
There was an alternate slate of electors that they were trying to push in the event that they could get somebody to say that Trump won Georgia rather than Joe Biden.
Precisely,
and
yes.
Biden carried the state and won the state's electoral votes when the Electoral College voted.
Exactly, yeah. So those are the two primary factors that this grand jury was assembled to sort of analyze. And what this grand jury came out with on February 16th in a very limited report where essentially only 9 pages were offered to the public, this grand jury says that one or more witnesses out of the 75 witnesses that were interviewed for this may have committed perjury or lied under oath in their testimonies. Now, this is 75 witnesses, and we haven't had a list of every single person that was called in, but we do know some notable names that were called in, such as Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. We have John Eastman. We have Newt Gingrich. We have a ton of people, and even Rudy
Newt
Giuliani.
Gingrich had been the Speaker of the House, was sort of an ally of Trump's. He represented Georgia in Congress for a number of years. John Eastman was the legal advisor who'd come up with the constitutional theory of how Trump could contest the election after the safe harbor date and when they were certifying the Electoral College results. Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of New York City, Trump's personal lawyer, was very active in all of the Stop the Steal lawsuits, as they described it. So these are major players in Trump's attempts to change the election results, as people would say.
Correct. And the spokesperson for President Trump has already come out with a statement on February 16th saying that, basically the same refrain that Trump's always said, that these phone calls were perfect, that there wasn't anything wrong with them.
He makes perfect phone calls.
Absolutely, according to him.
Right.
And on top of that, they actually went a little bit of a step further with this statement. They said that the attorneys that were on the call and all the officials that were listening, didn't stop Trump from making these statements when he was on the call. So that was kind of their little bit of oomph that they were trying to add to this statement to say today that there was nothing, to come of this. Now, to quote from what a lot of experts are currently saying right now about this grand jury and any potential indictments that could come out of it, a lot of people don't necessarily think that if Willis is going to go after indictments that it's going to be Trump directly.
Right.
It's a little bit of a stretch for anyone to say that at this point, based off of what we know. There are some theories out there by law professors that have suggested maybe there could be these accounts of perjury could be used to develop larger witnesses in a trial against someone of a higher profile. So, but perjury was, the key word from this report, and one or more people may have committed it. And the grand jury has no ability to actually bring indictments. It is all recommendations for the district attorney, which is Willis.
So it is still too early to tell what the Trump implications of this would be specifically.
Based on my readings and what I've seen from former prosecutors, yes. And one thing that is often brought up in this case is that we have history that shows perjury has, led to, some, prosecutions. For example, with Michael Flynn whenever he lied under oath to the FBI, and, contrast with John Durham. In some of his cases, he had also, relied on lying under oath in order to make his indictments. So
yeah, not exactly the same, but Bill Clinton's impeachment was largely centered on whether he lied under oath about his affair with Monica Lewinsky.
Precisely, yeah. So, that's kind of where a lot of legal experts are sort of talking about this right now. And Fani Willis has also said that any decisions for potential indictments are imminent. So she hasn't even said that her decision will lead to an indictment. So there could be nothing that comes out of this, for all we know.
Well, we'll be taking the midnight train to Georgia to find out. Thank you, Kaelan.
Absolutely.
You can read Kaelan and the rest of our policy team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.